Anti-immigration policies are already starting to hurt the economy. And that's not something that I'm saying. That's something that analysts over at JP Morgan are saying, because they're noticing that the pool of workers, and I'm not just talking about the labor shortage today, I'm talking about the labor shortage in the future. The pool of workers is going to be much smaller than what was previously expected. Now, there are many factors contributing to that, and anti-immigration policies happen to be one of the biggest factors. Population slowdown threatens trend growth, the November 12th note from JP Morgan stated, highlighting the fact that due to more aging boomers retiring from the workforce and 3 million fewer immigrants in the country, trend labor force growth is going to be limited at only 0.1% per year and risks hurting overall GDP growth. So they put together this fun little chart, fun little graph that I wanted to share with you all so you can kind of it'll help you visualize what was expected and what the shortfall looks like. So if you look at the pre-2017 trend, that's the orange line. It indicates the population growth that the economy would come to depend on to function appropriately. And then you look at the actual numbers and you see a pretty steep decline beginning in 2016. Gee, I wonder why. And of course, the anti-immigration policies coming from the Trump administration and then the continuation of those policies by the Biden administration has been pretty disastrous. And so I also want to be clear about one thing. What we're talking about here is legal immigration, okay? We're talking about workers who typically legally came into the country with visas meant to fill jobs, to work in certain industries and what have you. And so the anti-immigration policies coming from the Trump administration weren't just about ending undocumented immigration into the United States. It was about ending all immigration. And I think that while, his core base, Trump's core base, was under the assumption that that would somehow be a net positive for the country, that it would actually be positive in reserving or conserving our resources. Fact of the matter is, that's really not the way things work. So I wanted to give you some more information about that. And mind you, the other factor you should keep in mind is that population growth has slowed down considerably even without the immigration policies, because the birth rate has gone down pretty dramatically. In fact, it's gone down 6 years in a row as more and more couples are deciding against ever having children. Now, JP Morgan researchers noted that the Census Bureau estimated that the working age population, ages 16 to 64, peaked in 2019 and has finally been falling for almost 2 years. The estimates now put the working age population in 2021 at 2.5 million below expectations. The vast majority in the shortfall of these workers was a result of a decline in immigration to the United States, the researchers added, beginning during the Trump administration and continuing through the COVID pandemic. And, when you really take a step back and you look at this country's history, it's kind of hard to remember that the Republican Party wasn't always as vicious as it is today in regard to immigration. In fact, when it came to undocumented immigrants in the United States, one of the most, I would argue, progressive laws that was signed by President Ronald Reagan in 1987. He actually provided amnesty to the undocumented immigrants who were in the country at the time. Now, that's not to say that Ronald Reagan was this incredible, fantastic president who I agreed on or agreed with on everything. But when it came to the topic of immigration, if you watch debates between, let's say, even Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush on the topic of immigration, it sounds like two liberals debating that issue. And so you can see that the Republican Party has relied more and more on their culture wars, immigration being part of that culture war, to do their campaigning. They've become more and more extreme because really, what else are they going to offer to their constituents, right? The fear and the hate is what you get over and over again in these GOP campaigns, certainly on a presidential level as of late. And so I want to go back to what Reagan was like, because in 1986, that 1986 was when Ronald Reagan signed that bill. It was called the Immigration Reform and Control Act. And again, it provided amnesty to most undocumented immigrants who came to the country prior to 1982. And here's Ronald Reagan explaining during a debate why he chose to sign that legislation into law.
I supported this bill. I believe in the idea of amnesty for those who have put down roots and who have lived here, even though some time back they may have entered illegally. With regard to the employer sanctions, we must have that, not only to ensure that we can identify the illegal aliens, but also, while some keep protesting about what it would do to employers, there is another employer that we shouldn't be so concerned about. And these are employers down through the years who have encouraged the illegal entry into this country, because they then hire these individuals and hire them at starvation wages and with none of the benefits that we think are normal and natural for workers in our country. And the individuals can't complain because of their illegal status.
No, but you guys, let that sink in for a second. What he said there was absolutely correct. Part of the legislation he signed into law in 1986 would basically penalize employers who hire undocumented immigrants. Now, you can argue that that's just a way to punish undocumented immigrants, and I definitely agree that there's that element to it. However, there's an issue with employers specifically hiring undocumented labor because they can pay them whatever they want. And what are the undocumented workers going to do? Complain about it? Are they going to go to the authorities? They're in the country in an undocumented status and could get deported. And so that ends up driving wages down for everyone. Not to mention, it leads to abuse of undocumented immigrants. And so what Ronald Reagan was saying there was actually 100% correct, right? Providing amnesty for the undocumented immigrants in the country already was really important in providing worker protections to them, and also ensuring that it didn't lead to wages being driven down as a result of, underpaid undocumented labor. So I just wanted to provide that example, because when you look at the Republican Party today, it just shows how much they've decided to lean into the xenophobia, how much they've decided to lean into anti-immigration rhetoric, specifically for campaigning purposes, specifically for their honestly 100% pivot to culture war and culture war only. And it doesn't have to be that way. And at the end of the day, the very people who have allowed that hate messaging to persuade them might actually be harmed by that kind of thinking in the future. And I'm just talking about economically. At least that's what we're seeing in the analysis that's already coming out from JP Morgan.